stress. That's all important. So what is coping? Coping is the cognitive, behavioral, and emotional ways in which people manage stressful situations. We cope. We cope with what happens to us. Coping is a dynamic process that often involves adjusting our cognitive, behavioral, and emotional reactions to a stressor. It is not a one-time reaction. It is a constant reaction. Last week, I took over another class, and because I took over another class, I've been having difficulty coping with my increased workload. I was teaching 6 classes, now I'm teaching 7. Yeah, now I have to make up for all of the things that, all of the information that people didn't get from Dr. Standing Courage. Now I have to make up for all of this. I have to make up all that information, and we'll see if I can do it. But I'm kind of stressed out right now, and that's one of the reasons why I'm having a hard time reading. My eyes are going cross. Coping strategies vary in effectiveness. Some provide only temporary relief. Some are maladaptive in the long run, like drinking alcohol to cope. A really poor way of doing things. It doesn't really solve your problems. It just makes you forget your problems for a short period of time. And that ain't a good idea. There are 2 basic types of coping styles. One is the avoidant coping style, and the other is the approach coping style. And of course, as a psychologist, I would say you need to approach your problems. You need to be vigilant. You need to be aware of what's going on in your life. You need to face your stressors head on by gathering information about what's going on, by taking direct action against your stressors, and by making an active effort to resolve the problem. And of course, that's what I'm trying to do with this new class. The best way for me to deal with this is to get everything done as rapidly as I possibly can. The problem is I've got 6 other classes to worry about, and I've got students that keep questioning about what I'm going to do next. It was really weird. I took over this class, and some of the students started quizzing me about what I was going to do about their class. Was I going to ignore their class? And some of these students were in the class that I took over. So it was almost like they were picking on me. That's what it felt like anyway, but of course that's not exactly what was happening. But and eventually I'm going to get everything taken care of. I hope. I've taken care of everything in the past, so I'm assuming that I will be successful in this as well. Avoidant coping, there are lots of ways to be avoidant. These are attempts to avoid the problem in whatever way possible. You can have passive behavior. This is passive-aggressive behavior. You avoid the situation. You avoid people. You don't think about the problem. Sarah and I had disagreements when she was in charge. She didn't want me to have anything to do with how the program was structured. And because of that, we would have disagreements from time to time, but mostly we just didn't talk about it, and that's how we avoided these conflicts that we probably should have faced. She didn't want to talk about it, and so I became more passive-aggressive with her. And a good example is I don't know the checklist. I don't know the checklist because for 4 years she would not let me have anything to do with it. And because of that, I just stayed away from it. I figured the more I tried to get involved with it, the more angrier I would get, and the more conflict it would create. So rather than create conflict, I just stayed away from it. So that's one of the reasons why I don't even know what's on the checklist. I have no idea. It was the only way that I could get along with Sarah. And I told her at a couple different junctures that I was being passive-aggressive, and I don't like being passive-aggressive. I would rather deal with this stuff, but she didn't want me to deal with it for a couple different reasons. One, I have more experience teaching than she did, and I'm a lot older than she was, like by about 30 years. And you always have to be nice to your elders, don't you?
Kinda, it depends.
You better be nice to me, because I'm a lot older than you are.
It depends.
What do you mean it depends? You are always nice to your elders. You have to be nice to your elders. Write that down.
You're cool because I know you, but like other people that I know.
Yeah, you're not nice to those people?
No.
Okay. But you're nice to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're okay. As long as you're nice to me, I don't care if you're nice to Doris, that doesn't matter to me. Antisocial behaviors, you can use drugs. Risky sexual behavior, there's a reason why this is in here. We're all old enough that we don't do these kinds of things, but if we were 18 or 19 or 20-year-old kids, like who had just graduated from high school and still had our high school minds, risky sexual behavior is something that happens with those kids all the time. But of course, we're too smart to go out and hire a band of prostitutes to give us syphilis, right?
So class and ethnicity doesn't matter in that, right?
Right, of course not. Well, you're just hiring somebody to have sex with you.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you care what race they are? You're never going to see them again. Taking their problems out on others, of course, these are all antisocial behaviors. Fantasizing, wishing their problems away, hoping for a miraculous intervention. We're seeing a lot more of this poor coping techniques, this fantasizing aspect, and it has to do with video games. People think they're Iron Man, as stupid as that sounds, or there you go. We got Iron Man sitting right over here. They think they're Spider-Man, or they think they're...
I can't imagine females playing video games. I can see.
That's kind of sexist.
Yeah, I can't see that.
I play video games.
Really?
Yeah.
And you kick ass, don't you?
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, why play a video game unless you're going to kick ass?
It's not weird.
It's kind of weird.
It's not weird.
It's not weird at all.
It's weird.
She can have
It's not
fantasies about having a great big sword and chopping people into little pieces, just like you can.
Like Xena?
Xena.
That's the only warrior I know.
I don't know. Are you Xena?
No.
Oh, you don't play Xena? I don't know. Or shooting zombies in the head, isn't that? There's games for you. Or Halo 2 or 3. Aren't you shooting zombies in Halo 3 or creatures from outer space? Of the two styles, approach coping or vigilance is the most effective, of course. Face your problems, deal with them, and get her done. Get her done. Don't ignore it. That's what some people do with my classes. They say, oh, Bradway will let me turn in my stuff anytime that I want. So I'm going to wait until the day before grades are due and give him everything I've got, including the 5-page paper.
For 290, I was kind of surprised that you have deadlines.
What?
I heard you have deadlines for 290.
I have, what?
To have your assignments in by Sunday, and then it's going to close.
No, it doesn't close. Nothing ever closes.
Okay.
In my classes, nothing ever closes. Okay. I will accept them. I just want you to know this stuff. I'm not trying to teach you how to tell time. Since my watch hardly ever works. How can I teach you to tell time? Just get your stuff done. I just want you to learn it, okay? That's all that's important. I don't understand this whole you have to learn it within 15 minutes. That doesn't make any sense to me. Or a half an hour. Jeremiah opens his stuff for like a day and a half and then he closes it. And why? Why would you do that? I'm trying to teach you to be responsible. Be as irresponsible as you want, I don't care.
Yeah, that's true.
Just get it done eventually, okay? And just learn all that stuff.
So people could say that Jeremiah cares and other people don't.
And I don't care?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably, you can say that if you like. My God, you're spread all over the place.
Oh, man.
He's manscaping. You know what manscaping is?
No.
It's where you sit on a chair and you spread your legs apart so that nobody will get close to you.
Okay, I'll put a bag.
Oh, did you
On the
mean
table.
like man-spreading? That's-
Man-spreading, yeah, it's manscaping. It's not shaving pubic area.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, like, the best way to learn is when you're uncomfortable. Is that true?
The best way to learn is when you're uncomfortable. Well, you've got more hormones running through your body, like cortisol and epinephrine, which allow you to learn better. So potentially that's true. But I wouldn't use that as a learning technique. Waiting until the last minute to learn anything. Vigilance, we're talking about vigilance. Vigilance is linked to better health outcomes. Vigilance is linked to less psychological distress. Vigilance is linked to a weaker physiological response to a stressor. So the more you face your problems, the more more likely that you're going to live for a long time. And the less you face your problems, the more likely you're going to die young. Problem-focused coping deals directly with stressful situation, reducing its demand, increasing our ability to deal with the stressors. The individual might break the problem into smaller, more manageable parts, and that always works. I have no idea why that does that. Is it still there? Yes. Okay. Now it's gone. Okay, I've done something. Emotion-focused coping is a coping strategy in which the person tries to control his or her emotional response to a stressor. We do this when there is little we can do to reduce the stressor, like this class. This is really not this class, of course. This is easy stuff, since I wrote these notes, 3 or 4 years ago, my PowerPoints. But the new class I have, the 290 class, are you in the 290 class? Okay. See, the 290 class, I haven't taught that in 10 years. So this is really stressful for me. There's nothing I can do about it. It's not like I can break it down into smaller parts. There's nothing I can do to reduce the stress. I just have to do it. So if you're gonna watch me go partially insane while I'm trying to teach that damn class. I haven't taught the class in 10 years. This is another Sarah problem. See, Sarah wouldn't let me teach this class. She had to teach the class. She didn't think I could teach it so that you guys can learn anything, but we'll see what happens. If you don't learn anything, call Sarah up on the telephone and tell her that she was right. I can't do it. I couldn't do it. She wouldn't let me teach it, but she let Sue teach it. See, only Sarah could teach that class. You're getting the picture. Okay. Yeah, we had a lot of conflicts between the two of us.
Where was she from?
She's Canadian.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. See, I almost used a swear word with
She's a
Canadian.
Canadian married to Navajo.
I'm sorry?
She's a Canadian married to Navajo, is it?
She's married to a Navajo, yeah. She's Canadian. I don't know, and I don't know what her maiden name was, but,
Kind.
no, Kine is Jerry's name. I don't know what her maiden name was, but her name when I first got here was Unsworth, and I don't know if that's her maiden name or not. She's been married, this is all on tape.
Yeah, nobody watches it.
She's away, thanks. She was married twice before. I'm glad that nobody watches it.
I watch
Thanks,
it.
Kevin. Yeah, you watch it, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Problem, so there's emotion-focused coping, and then problem-focused coping tends to appear in childhood. Emotion-focused coping appears in adolescence. So we learn how to be emotional, how to deal with situations when we're adolescents. And if you think about what jerks you were when you were adolescents, and you were, no matter who you are, you were probably a jerk to your parents. That was you trying to break away from them. That's you learning to use your emotions to control situations. And of course, if your parents, they reacted to that emotion, then potentially that's how you've learned to deal with situations, unfortunately. Now, strangely enough, most parents allow their their daughters, my God, I can't talk today. They allow their daughters to be more emotional than their sons. Boys are supposed to be tough, okay? And they can't cry, they can't yell, they have to be tough. They have to tough it up. So, anyway. As weird as that is. The type of emotion-focused coping that is linked to the most emotional distress and health problems is rumination. In other words, thinking about the same thing over and 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 over again. That's what rumination means, thinking about the same thing over and over again. I went to bed last night thinking about 290, and I woke up this morning thinking about 290. So I was ruminating about 290. I didn't want to come to work today because of 290. Rumination is thinking repetitively, that's what I just said. This can cause an emotional cascade where rumination leads to being upset, which leads to more rumination. So the more you think about it, the more you get emotional about it, the more emotional you get about it, the more you think about it. As painful and ugly as that is. Rumination. Problem-focused versus emotion-focused coping. Which is better? It depends on the nature of the stressful event and whether constructive action is possible. Often the two work together as emotion-focused coping is used in controlling initial emotional impulse, and problem-focused is used later, dealing with more constructively with whatever your problem is with your stressor. So being emotional in the beginning and then using your problem-solving skills to take care of your situation makes a lot of sense. So go ahead and overreact in the beginning, that's okay. Overreact in the beginning, and then you can solve the problem. This is how my wife deals with me. She gets angry with me, and then later she comes up with a solution. It's always the right solution. The Colonel always comes up with the right solution, as irritating as that is. Physiological differences. Men have a stronger catecholamine reactivity to stressors. They have increased epinephrine levels and also increased norepinephrine responses. Remember, norepinephrine is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel like you can do things, like you can solve all the world's problems. It's kind of the narcissism neurotransmitter because it tells you you're on top of the world and you can do anything. This may reflect the tendency of men to be more hostile in seeking a physical solution than women in a crisis situation. Usually women are more controlled and men are more physical. So a woman will yell and a man will punch the wall. And of course, then he breaks his hand, then he has to go to the emergency room. And while he's in there for 4 or 5 hours, eventually he quiets down, and then when he comes back, she's already solved the problem, hopefully. And if she hasn't, then he figures out what the solution is. Women have a stronger glucocorticoid response, slowing down the immune response, so women are more likely to get sick if they have a problem, and men are more likely to have a hostile reaction to a problem because of the epinephrine and norepinephrine. When under the same work-related stress, usually men and women have about the same response. But if it's a different situation other than work-related, then women will react they're more likely to get sick, and men are more likely to punch the wall.
So could stress relate to kind of like just like social science? I
Sure.
guess like finding the mate.
Wait a minute, we're dealing with anger and now you want to find
Yeah.
a mate?
Just like
Are you angry about the fact that, okay.
yeah.
All I know is women have more patience than men.
You know, like
Women have more patience than men, sure, because men act hostilely. Our reaction form is for the increase of epinephrine and norepinephrine. So yes, we act more hostilely. Not only that, but we have more testosterone, so men are more likely to be violent. Yeah, yeah. To punch the wall, and then they have to go to the hospital, and then
I'm not emotional.
you're not emotional.
No.
You're not supposed to be emotional.
Yeah,
You're a guy.
yeah.
Okay, that's what the beard's all about. Okay. Because of the way that men are not socialized to show emotions, emotional approach coping may not be a viable option for men. And of course, that really irritates women when they get emotional and the men don't react to them properly. Men have a difficult time connecting emotionally with others. This may create loneliness and detachment, of course, and that's why more men are alone than women. As sad as that is. Don't cry, it'll be okay. Oh, wait a minute, you don't cry, do you? You're not emotional. Good, good. Men emphasize focused coping. Women emphasize emotion-focused coping. Socialization hypothesis, girls and boys are socialized in different ways, creating lifelong behavioral differences between men and women. And sometimes women get really irritated with men because they don't react emotionally. And this is how I got stabbed in the chest. My wife was arguing with me and I went to sleep. And she said the reason she stabbed me was because I went to sleep while she was talking to me. Well, she was yelling at me is what she was doing. And I had to get up the next morning and go to work. So I went to sleep. And the next thing I know, I've got a knife in my chest. So we react differently to different stressors. It was a stressor for her because she just spent all the money and we didn't have any money for food. I was trying to figure out how we were going to get more money so that we could feed the kids.
So did you like drive yourself to the hospital, or did you?
No, this is what happened. Because I was in the service, and I was the military member, and she was my dependent. If I had gone to the hospital and told them what happened, then they would have arrested me because I didn't control my wife. So I would have been arrested for her stabbing me, if that makes any sense. Because it was on base, they would have had to have called the civilian personnel to come and arrest my wife. So here, I would have been in jail on the base, and she would have been in jail in Lubbock, Texas, downtown. And that leaves my two kids without anybody in the house.
So you got well without going to the hospital?
Yeah, well, what happened was, I was working in the hospital.
Oh,
The next morning, I went in and they sewed it up. And I told them, look, you know, my wife did this, and they said, oh, they laughed at me. You know, guys are. They don't react emotionally to things. They react with humor. So they sewed it up, and everything was fine. And they didn't turn me in, thank goodness. And actually, one of them was having an affair with my wife. So the guy that actually sewed me up was having an affair with my wife.
Crazy.
I know, it got really strange after that. Anyway. Eventually, she wasn't my wife anymore. And eventually, she ran off with him.
So it happened for a good thing.
Yeah, well, you know, everything works out in the end.
Yeah.
And not my chest healed, you know, no problem. The knife bounced off my rib. She stabbed me right over my heart. She could have gotten me good. She could have killed me. But it got stuck in my rib. The knife did, so. I know. Everything worked out in the end, like you said. Role constraint hypothesis, when stressors are the same, gender is irrelevant. So if we all go through a tornado, of course, we're all going to react very similarly to that tornado. Coping is easier. The more money that you have, the more time you have, and rich people usually have all the time in the world. If you have a good job, this is a pretty good job, I'm doing okay. The more education you have, the more easier it is for you to cope. The more friends that you have and the more stable your family is, the more likely you're going to be able to handle stress. Impoverished families experience more pollution, more substandard housing, more crime, more low-paying work, more limited education, lack of access to health insurance and health care. Children from low socioeconomic status homes experience more divorce, more punitive parenting, in other words, they get spanked a lot more, and more frequent school transfers because the parents they get kicked out of the housing development or whatever. Substandard housing, low socioeconomic status, they have substandard housing, limited access to health care, greater incidence of health compromising behaviors, less focused coping, possibly due to sense of hopelessness. Their only recourse is to manage emotional responses. And so how do you do that? Well, you get drunk, of course. How else can you manage your emotional responses? Stein and Nymatha in 1999 felt that low socioeconomic status takes greater toll on women than men. And this is because they tend to be more traditional. The poorer they are, the more traditional they are, and therefore they feel that women have a select job to do and men have a select job to do. And it just turns out that almost all the work is for the woman to do, as far as the cooking, clean, and all that other stuff. And he either works or he doesn't work. So what does he have to do? Well, he gets to watch television while she cleans the house and takes care of the kids, because men don't do that stuff. Remember that, men don't do that stuff. More frequent avoidant coping strategies, passive behavior, fantasizing, and antisocial behaviors, which has to do with drinking and taking drugs, but more fantasizing and passive behaviors. So there's a lot of fantasizing going on right now in the United States, and Doris and I were talking about this earlier about Donald Trump and some of the strange things that are going on. There's a lot of people in the United States that are just ignoring it all. They just ignore everything that he does. He just pardoned 10 people that, 10 rich people. I don't know if that bothers you, but that really bugs the hell out of me. Son of a bitch. How in the world could he, did I just call the president a son of a bitch? Oh, maybe I called the other 10 people. No, I called him a son of a bitch. But people just ignore it. And so what do you do? What do you do when something like this happens? Or he attacks a military guy, or he says that all those guys with TBI, traumatic brain injury, just have headaches. What do you do when that happens, when he really pisses you off? Well, you stop watching the news, of course. You ignore it, you fantasize. You pretend that everything's okay. One of the things that happened yesterday, the head of the Treasury Department, they were talking to the head of the Treasury Department, and he was talking about the wonderful recovery that has happened with Donald Trump. And then they showed him the statistics on what happened with Obama and what happened with Trump. And as it turns out, Obama's recovery was a lot stronger than Trump's recovery. And he said, no, everybody felt bad with Obama's recovery. Nobody felt good about Obama's recovery. Well, no Republicans felt good because it was a Democrat doing it. Anyway, a lot of people are just ignoring this stuff. And potentially you are too. You have no idea what's going on. And so when it comes time to vote, you're going to go, well, wait a minute, let me think about this. Bradway thinks I should vote for anybody but Trump, so I'll vote for Trump. That's what he's going to do. Fantasizing. He's going to fantasize. Harley's going to punch you if you vote for Trump. She'll hit you really hard. Maybe with a knife in her hand. Okay.
With a plastic knife.
Just a thought. Don't hurt him. He knows not what he does. Poverty level for some minorities is quite high. In 2008, a study of poverty levels found that children living below the poverty level, they are so poor they're not even poor. They're below poor. African Americans, 34.7% of all African Americans live below the poverty level. That's 4.5% of the entire population. 4.5%. Hispanics, 30.6% of all Hispanics in the United States live below the poverty level. That's 4.3% of the entire population of the United States. Of white people, only 10.6% live below the poverty level. These are children. Yeah, these are children. 10.6%. But that's 7.42% of the entire population. So if we're talking about people that are living below the poverty level, who are we talking about? Well, if we're talking about a group, we're talking about white people because they represent 7.42% of the population. So there's a lot of really poor white people out there. But it's less of the entire population of white people, as strange as that may seem. So if we're gonna paint a picture of the poorest people in the United States, what color is their skin? Is it black, brown, or white? It should be white. But once upon a time, they were trying to do away with welfare. The Republicans, bastards. They were trying to do away with welfare. It was during the Reagan administration. What race was he dealing with? He tried to paint everybody who was on welfare as one select race. And that race was black people. Now, it's easy to be angry with black people. A lot of people in the United States don't like black people. There are people on this reservation that don't like black people.
I love black people.
Wow, there you go. And you and I are probably the only two in the whole room. There's 6. How many are here? 5 of us. But there's a lot of people that don't like black people, and they vote Republican. See, it's damn Republicans again. Anyway, so he painted the wrong picture. But the poor white people really liked it because there was somebody to be angry with, black people. Middle-class African-American males report higher levels of racial discrimination than African-American females. Now, why would that be? Why do we hate black men more than we hate black women? I mean, if you're going to hate black people, you might as well hate everybody, not just the guys. Why do you hate black males more than black women?
The criminals.
They're criminals, every damn single one of them. Okay.
They're seen
I thought
as
you said you
aggressive.
love black people.
They're seen as aggressive.
Males are more aggressive than females, so I guess that's logical. During the Depression, black males couldn't find a job for love nor money, for anything. But black females could find jobs as domestics, especially in the South. I lived in Mississippi in the 1990s, in the middle 90s, 95 through 98.
How far is that from Iowa?
Mississippi? Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa.
It's a big difference.
Oh, geez, like night and day. Mississippi had, 35% African Americans. Iowa has 6%, I think, 7%. That's pretty night and day. A lot of farms in Iowa, a lot of old plantations in Mississippi. The leading employer in Mississippi is the state. So more people work for the state than any other industry. Second highest is the Choctaw tribe. Choctaw tribe own casinos, they own lumber yards, they own all kinds of industry. Factories, they own factories. So they're the second largest employer in Mississippi. In Iowa, it's agriculture in one way or another. Anyway, so why do we hate black males? Because they're more aggressive. I don't know. That's all.
No, they're seen as aggressive.
There's got to be some problem. I don't know. Some people get it in their heads that they're different. The more years of education an African American male has, the stronger his perception of racial discrimination. So you learn things. It's like you guys come into Dene College and then all of a sudden you hate white people because they're the ones that they're all related to Kit Carson and he's the ones that rounded you guys up and sent you all to Fort Sumner. It's my fault. Cousin Kit was the one that did it. Of course, he was not your cousin, he's my cousin. So the more education you have, the more you realize how badly the discrimination is in the United States. African American males are more likely to experience microaggressions. Now all of a sudden they understand all the insults that they're getting. There are indignities and marginalizing messages that people use. The N-word, for example, is very, very marginalizing. This especially occurs in predominantly white environments. So a black man moving into a white environment where he's making more money, he's doing okay, he's going to have more discrimination. The stress on him is going to be a lot harder, a lot stronger if he lives in a white environment. And as you can imagine, Barack Obama, President of the United States, that was an all-white institution, president, forever. And here all of a sudden we've got a black president. You can imagine the stress on the poor guy. Look how white his hair is. Poor guy. He's just a kid. He's only in his 50s. Look how white his hair is. College-educated African Americans are more likely than their white cohorts to experience unemployment and job insecurity. How many black men do we have? How many black people do we have working at this college?
6.
6?
4. There's Don, there's Kipchoge, 2.
we went from 6 to 2. How about Bernie?
Oh,
Bernie?
yeah.
Is that 3? See, I don't really know Bernie. Oh, wait a minute. Deb Robinson.
Don't know her.
She teaches right after, she's an English teacher. So there's Deb and there's Bernie.
Oh, there's a guy on my team, he's half,
He doesn't work here.
okay. He does, he actually works for
He
Vigilance.
goes. So what do we've got 2.
4. Actually, I'm just counting all the people.
Yeah, you're just counting all the people. That's not one. 2 black people work here. How many white people work here? It's me and Don. Wait a minute, who else is there? I can't think of it. Ashley somebody, and her husband, that's 4. How we doing? Oh, there's a bunch of people over in the science department. Like, it's like almost everybody over there. No, don't trust them. Okay. Even, I can't even remember why I asked that question.
I don't think this college would get anywhere without white people.
Let's not say that, don't write that down. Let's pretend it would, okay? Just for grins. Even economic success doesn't ensure more secure housing or community living conditions, as moving to the suburbs predicts higher mortality rates for African American men. I've lived in a black neighborhood before, when I was in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is actually 70% black. I know, it's really kind of interesting. And the reason they live in Washington, D.C. is because the county just to the north of them, Maryland, which is in Maryland, Prince George's County, was segregated until 1972. So they couldn't live in Maryland, and they couldn't live in, just south of there is Arlington, Virginia. And Arlington was segregated too. So if you were black, you had to live in Washington, D.C. That's the only place you could live. You couldn't live in Maryland, you couldn't live in Virginia. As weird as that is. And this was in the 70s. Anyway. But I lived in a black neighborhood, oh, I'm sorry, went the wrong direction. I lived in a black neighborhood right inside Maryland. And I don't know, I was like, there were 3 white families in this whole huge neighborhood. So you'd think I'd get attacked all the time because, you know, I'm cousins with Kit Carson. Everybody hates Kit Carson.
Up that way too?
No, I'm just kidding. They have no clue.
I was thinking it was KKK.
All 3 of us families got together and we formed a KKK organization. No, I used to walk around the neighborhood all the time. Nobody gave me a hard time. Everybody kind of didn't dislike me. How's that? Okay. In 1990s, Sherman James proposed an African-American male coping mechanism called John Henry Ism. This is fascinating. If you know the song of John Henry, when John Henry was a little baby sitting on his daddy's knee, he decided he was going to become a railroading man and he was going to drive railroad spikes for the rest of his life. So he became a driving machine. This guy was so good, and that was John Henry. So they put him up against a mechanized machine, John Henry. So John Henry's driving spikes, railroad spikes. And guess who won? The machine did, and it broke John Henry's heart. And he died young. Okay, so that's John Henryism. It's black guys dying young for trying to work too hard, trying to fit into society. That's what John Henryism is. This technique involves facing stress with a gargantuan effort that can lead to hypertension, of course, and death at an early age. And that's what happened to John Henry. Recent studies have found that John Henryism is most likely when African American males are embedded in a low socioeconomic status with few means to escape. However, when afforded financial and educational equity, John Henryism is less likely. That's it? Okay, so you understand what John Henryism is. Okay. It doesn't exist anyplace except in with African American males. You try so hard that you work yourself to death, which I hope is not happening with 290. Okay, I'll try not to work myself to death. I'll try not to be a black male and work myself to death. Okay. I'll try to be a white guy. Be greedy and try to get all the money I can. Not all white guys are greedy, Doris, don't worry. Jeez. So they're laughing. Hardiness is a cluster of stress buffering trails consisting of commitment, challenges, and control. That's what hardiness is. Hardy people view life demands as challenges rather than threats. We face our challenges and we tackle them. That makes us hardy. Other tasks that other people might consider stressors are life commitments for hardy people. They give their lives meaning. Your family's a bunch of jackasses, but you get together and you handle the situation. Your job is tough. Everybody else is dying of heart attacks, and you face the challenge and you actually get stronger. That's being hardy. Your community may be a difficult place to live in, but of course you are hardy, so you handle it. You're hardy. That's what hardiness is. Don't get excited. Hardy people feel a stronger level of control over their lives, and this has a lot to do, control has a lot to do with whether you survive or whether you don't survive. We keep talking about control. We talk about PTSD. The people that suffer from PTSD were the ones that had no control over what happened to them. This is what happened during Vietnam. The soldiers that were over there, that were in charge of the situation, they didn't have to worry about PTSD. The ones that were privates and corporals and the ones that were being bossed around a lot, those were the individuals that suffered from PTSD. So control has a lot to do with whether you survive or whether you don't. Whether you can get yourself into a situation where it's survivable or not. Now, I've always been a subordinate. I've always worked for other people, but I've never let people boss me around, which is a trick. And that's one of the reasons why Sarah and I had such conflicts. And the reason was because she wanted to boss me around, and I don't let anybody boss me around. So that was a tough one. But in order for me to survive, I had to be passive-aggressive with some of the things that had to do with this program. And the reason the program looks the way it does is because that's the way she wanted it. I thought we needed more counseling classes. And I tried to argue with her about it. She didn't want to argue. I'm in charge, so it's the way I want it to be. But in the future, now that she's not here anymore, potentially, of course, we'll have more counseling classes. I don't know how you feel about psychology and whether you want to be counselors or not, but that's the way it's going to look in the future. Okay. We don't have any more cognitive psychologists who want to do research on everything. Okay. I thought that was a mistake. But that's, my vision is one thing, her vision was something totally different. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about hardy people. Hardy personalities are linked to lower levels of anxiety and adaptive coping styles. In other words, so when Sarah gave me a hard time, did I go home and get drunk? No, I don't drink. So, I couldn't do that. Did I shoot up with heroin? No. Is there heroin around here?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, thanks.
I've never seen it.
Okay. Right, Kevin, sure.
Seriously. I've meant.
Oh, please, all you have to do is go to Pinyon and the place is, I've never been to Pinyon, so I don't know. I've seen a lot of meth though. It's not pleasant. Hardy individuals adjust to cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and many other health problems readily. So if they do come down with a problem like my heart attack, what did I do? Did I curl up in a ball and crawl into the corner? No, I exercised. And I took care of my problem. And now I'm healthier than practically everybody. Okay, I can't outrun you, but yeah, some people I can outrun. Old farts I can outrun. Hardiness and health are more pronounced in men than women. Research shows that hardy people have a different mindset than their sickly cohorts. They have stronger commitment to life. I keep telling you I'm going to live forever. It's not true, I won't, but I'll live as long as I possibly can. Felt they feel more in control, and control, here it is, control again. Really important. They had a greater appetite for a challenge. Challenge, 290, damn, I got to teach that damn class. Without a textbook.
What's 290?
Yeah,
Research methods?
Oh.
What's that?
research methods. Oh.
I hope you teach it again next semester.
I don't know about that. We're trying to hire somebody to teach that class. There's a lady from U of A that wants to come up here, so we may hire her. And she said she's dying to teach that class. So we'll see. On balance, studies support the idea that some people handle stress more effectively because they view themselves as choosing to live challenging lives. And of course, these are the hardy people. Hardy people are more likely to engage in positive reappraisal of stressful events. Sure, yeah, this stuff is almost going to kill me, but I'll be stronger afterwards, you'll see, maybe. Resilience is the ability to spring back from sometimes overwhelming stressors and the flexibility to adapt to changing environmental demands. Resilience comes from positive personality traits and positive life experiences. Resilient children have easy temperaments, they have high self-esteem, they have a sense of personal control. Once again, it's that control. Well-developed academic, social, and creative skills. They have social cognition, social support, at least one consistent adult in their lives. That's all you need is somebody to support you. You may have the biggest jerks for parents in the world. Mom and dad just are not supportive. Mom's worried about her getting old and all the wrinkles on her face, and dad's worried about his muscles and making a lot more money. So the parents aren't paying attention, but as long as you got Aunt Sally or Uncle George or Grandma or Grandpa to pay attention to you, that's all you need. You just need one person. And even if you don't have anybody in your family, you come from the jerkiest family in the county, it's okay, because maybe you've got a coach that's going to pay attention to you. And that's all you need in your life, is one consistent adult that will give you support. That's it. Just one. It doesn't have to be mom, doesn't have to be dad, doesn't even have to be a relative. It just needs to be somebody to give you support. Explanatory style can lead to resilience. This is a person's propensity to attribute outcomes to positive causes or negative causes. People who look at the bright side of situations are more likely to survive a stressor. Pessimists have attributions that are global, stable, and internal. They have a tendency to ruminate. They think about all their problems over and over and over again. They are associated with anger, with hostility, with depression, with smoking, with drinking, with drug abuse. It's linked to early mortality. So the more pessimistic you are, the younger you will die. Sorry, I congratulate you for being dead. Those are pessimists, and of course, I don't know if you've ever tangled with a pessimist. They're not any fun at all. They've got all these negative ideas about everything. Barack Obama was a communist. Oh, what else was he? Hillary Clinton was the devil. She had horns and a tail. I know they have all this pessimistic stuff that they talk about all the time. Now, weirdly enough, if we look at different cultures, we see select cultures are more pessimistic than others. They base their culture on pessimism. Russia is that way. The Russians are pessimistic people. It's just the most bizarre thing in the world. How they survive, I don't know. But they are so pessimistic. So as long as you can control their society, then potentially they live as long as everybody else. But the Soviet Union collapsed, and what happened within 4 years? The life expectancy of males in the Soviet Union, or in Russia, went down 10 years in 4 years. Why? Because they drank so much. And they're not drinking beers. These guys don't drink beers. They're drinking vodka. They're drinking like almost pure alcohol.
Seems like they know a lot more about warfare.
They
Seems
don't.
Like really?
They don't.
They're breeded to
No.
be soldiers.
No.
Seems like that.
No, and this doesn't go back very far, because you have to remember that the Tsars controlled Russia until 1917. And before 1917, they were deathly afraid that the common man was going to take over their position, that they were going to overthrow them. And that's exactly what happened in the Russian Revolution. So the answer is no. Russians, the way that they won wars or won battles before 1917 was to send more men into combat than any other group. They're not very good fighters. They're just not that good. Sorry. They did defeat the Germans, the best army in the world, but they didn't defeat them because they were better soldiers. They defeated them because they had a lot more men. Anyway, yeah. Germans were fighting on two fronts. Russians were only fighting against the Germans, but the Germans were fighting. They were fighting the Allies in the West, and they were fighting the Russians in the East.
Is self-efficacy like resilience?
Yes, it's how you feel about yourself. So self-efficacy is one of the aspects of resilience. Oh, okay. Feeling good about yourself. I like that. Ah. Oh, wait a minute. Did I finish? Yeah, I did. Okay. See, you keep getting me off topic. It's your fault, Kevin. Optimists lead more upbeat lives. They have shorter hospital stays. I had a heart attack. Life flew me into Great Falls, Montana. They did the surgery, and I was out of the hospital the next day. The next day I was out of the hospital. I know. Something wrong with that doctor. They have faster recoveries, they have longer, healthier lives. There you go. The more resilient you are, the more optimistic you are, the longer you're going to live. Positive emotions increase a person's physical, cognitive, and social resources. It enables more effective coping with stressful events. Promotes healthier lifestyles. It may also help sustain your immune functioning. And of course, I never get sick, despite the fact I'm missing one of the major parts of my immune system. It ain't there. They chopped it out in 1985. And the doctor said, you should be dead, and I didn't die. Damn it. Did I? Am I a ghost? No, I'm not a ghost. I don't have a spleen. Your spleen is a major part of your immune system, and I don't have one. It's gone. I lost it in 1985, in a soccer game. You ever played soccer?
No.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what happened. 2 months after beginning law school, optimistic law students showed a 13% increase in the blood level of CD4 cells in the bloodstream. That is part of your immune system, keeps you healthy, compared to a 3% drop in the number of cells in the bloodstream of pessimists. So they were looking at individuals that had an optimistic view of the world and ones that had a pessimistic view of the world. Here you go, this is it right here, this is the CD4. As you can see, the CD4 and the optimist went up, and the CD4 and the pessimist went down. So who caught colds? Well, the pessimist did, of course. Similarly, natural killer cells, cytotoxicity, a measure of cell activity level, rose 42% in the optimists, but only by 9% in pessimists. Now, what does that have to do with? That has to do with the fact that they actually did come in contact with diseases, and everybody's NK cell level would go up, should go up in the flu season. Of course, you start school in August, and then we're talking about, and the flu season hits September, October, November. So it should go up for everybody, and it did go up for everybody, but it went up a lot more for optimists than it did for pessimists, 42% as compared to 9%. Studies have shown that children who maintain a positive attitude have better social skills. This in turn fosters lasting social bonds and attachments. In other words, they are more positive. What time do we stop? 4:20, right? 4:20. Okay. A study by Riff et al. In 2001 showed that people who experience positive emotions with their families as children and then as adults with their own families were half as likely to display high levels of wear and tear in their bodies. So you live longer, you can run longer, you can exercise more. I have a friend who graduated the year before I started college, and he's still high jumping. He's a high jumper, tall and slender. And this guy's still high jumping at 75. He's still high jumping. Now, I don't know if you understand wear and tear or not, but this guy shouldn't even be walking, and here he is, he's high jumping. Internationally, he high jumps all around the world, as weird as that is. So if you have a positive home life and you maintain a positive home life for yourself, if you grow up in a positive environment and you maintain one in your own home life, it actually, your joints are healthier, as weird as that sounds. I lift weights. You saw me over at the gym the other day, okay. With Jeremiah. He's big, that kid's big, he's big. But I can outlift him. Don't tell him that. It'll hurt his feelings. I can outlift that big guy. Oster et al. In 2006 found that older Hispanic Americans reported that individuals who identified themselves as having positive emotions rather than pessimistic and cynical attitudes were less likely to become disabled or to have died during the 2-year longitudinal study. All you need to do is have a positive outlook on the world, and everything turns out much, much better. Trying to alter stressful situations. An optimist faces stress by trying to alter stressful situations, actively engaging in direct problem-focused action by perceiving more control over stress, over a stressor, leading to more effective coping responses, seeking a treatment when they're sick, and of course that's something a lot of people don't do. They don't go to the doctor. A pessimist faces stress by passively disengaging and ruminating, obsessing and allowing oneself to become overwhelmed by persistent thoughts about stressors linked to self-criticism, past depression, excessive dependency on others, perceiving the world and any physical problems as uncontrollable. There's that word control again. The more control you have, the better off you're going to be. Okay, don't listen to this, Kevin. So if you're a female and you want to get married, you need to be around somebody that doesn't try to control you. The more they try to control you, the unhealthier it is for you. And of course, he's a controlling male, so be careful with that guy right there. So it has to do with control. Everything has to do with control. Your emotions, your feelings. So if you marry that jock, that captain of the football team, you know, he may be that controlling asshole. Did I say asshole? I didn't mean that, I meant something else. He may be controlling. Sure, he looks good, but geez, he's gonna treat you like you're dumb as dirt. So what you need to do in order to live a long and healthy life and a happy life is to be with somebody that doesn't try to control you. How about that? That's a hint for you too. Be careful who you marry. Remember that lady that stabbed me in the chest because I went to sleep while she was yelling at me? She tried to control my behavior.
Women can be
I-
controlling too.
I ended up with a knife in my chest.
I think being a part of the matrilineal society, I
Ah.
think it's more like that, actually.
What, the women try to control the men?
Yeah, women can be controlling too.
Be careful. Marry somebody else. Marry somebody else. Pessimists are identifiable and can be trained to deal with a negative life view through learned optimism. You have to teach them how to be optimistic. They need to learn to counter-argue all these pessimistic ideas, offering an alternative causes for disappointment. They write books about this crap. I mean, there are naturally optimistic people out there, and there are naturally pessimistic people out there, and they try to train these people not to be so pessimistic. And they write books about this stuff. I wouldn't read one. I'm too optimistic. I've got too much serotonin splashing through my head. What the hell's wrong with me? Why am I so happy all the time? There must be something wrong with me. Only to a pessimist is there something wrong with me.
So would a pessimist kind of say like, too much of the good is not too good?
They would focus on the bad and they would ignore the good. Like this economy, they would focus on all the. There's good things about the economy. They would focus on the good, and they'd focus on what's happening, the bad things in the economy. There are bad things happening in the economy, like people's wages aren't going up. They would focus on that, and they'd say the economy's not doing anything. That's what they did with Obama. Obama's recovery was stronger than Trump's recovery. But what did they focus on? They focused on whether the rich people were making more profits or not. That's what they focused on. That's why he was talking like that yesterday. That was yesterday. So a pessimist would focus on the negative and ignore the positive. And an optimist focuses on the positive and tries to deal with the negative. But you have to train these people. You have to make them read books in order to get them to be more optimistic. Recognizing an overreaction to a stressor, and they overreact to lots of different stupid stuff. Showing that the belief is factually incorrect, undermining the pessimistic explanation. Obama's black, therefore the United States is going to hell. I got that message from a friend of mine, geez, over and over again. Guess what happened to him? Died of a heart attack at 67. Yeah, he's dead, and I'm alive. And I'm positive, and he was a negative person. Now he's dead. I got a picture of him on my other computer, I'll show you. And he smoked. What an idiot. Personal control is the belief that we make our own decisions and to determine what we do or what others do to us. This starts to happen with children at the age of 2. We start developing our sense of autonomy, our sense of control. Albert Bandura refers to this as self-efficacy, what Harley was talking about before. The belief in your ability to handle a stressful situation. That's self-efficacy. I talk about self-efficacy. I used to draw blood a lot. Gallons and gallons, not from the same person, of course. That would kill them. I used to draw blood. Well, sometimes people have really bad veins. Really bad veins. But I knew that anytime I went into anybody's room to draw their blood, I was going to get their blood, and it didn't matter what the situation was. I went into a lady who was dying. She was dying, and she kept dying on me. And I've got I'm trying to draw blood gases on this lady from her artery. And I got those damn blood gases, even though that lady died twice while I was drawing her blood. She died twice. They were working on her, trying to keep her alive. and I'm drawing blood gases. Why you would order blood gases on somebody that's dying is beyond me, but I drew them anyway, and I got that damn blood. Even though when you're dead, your heart stops beating. And what was forcing the blood into my syringe was her heartbeat. So when she died, her heart stopped beating and I stopped getting blood, but I got the damn blood anyway. That's what self-efficacy is. I could draw blood from somebody. One time I drew blood from the vein on top of this guy's thumb, and it was a coagulation study. Now, coagulation studies, you can't mess around. If you move the needle, then you screw the test up. But I drew it from the top of his thumb. He died 45 minutes later. Not that I killed him, okay? But I was able to get the blood from that guy's thumb. And everybody else had gone upstairs to draw blood from this guy, and nobody got his blood. I finally went upstairs and got the blood from the top of his thumb. That's self-efficacy. I could draw blood from a rock, or a dead lady, or a dying man. That's self-efficacy. Now do you understand self-efficacy? Personal control is associated with adaptive, problem-focused coping and healthier lifestyle behavior. My mom was the same way. Look at this, I'm 70 years old, I'm steady as a rock. My mother was drawing blood at age 90. She was a nurse. She could start an IV on anything. She could start an IV on a leaf. I mean, that's how steady my mother was. Okay, so we've talked about all the positive stuff. Let's talk about some of the negative stuff. Learned helplessness. When confronted with repeated uncontrollable stress, people may learn that they have little control over what happens to them. If they accept a passive behavior because of the stress, they may not escape when the opportunity arises, and this is known as learned helplessness. And if you watch old war movies where they're dealing with escape from prisoner of war camps or whatever, then you see this a lot. The individuals that decided that always tried to escape, they were the ones that survived the camps. The ones that didn't try to escape usually died in the camps because they had a feeling they couldn't escape. They had learned helplessness. It happened in concentration camps. It happens in factories, and I used to work in a factory. It happens in prisons. So what's going to happen with these people who are working in a factory? They're going to die young. I used to know guys that, see, I came from an area that there were a lot of factories. Everybody worked in a factory. So these guys would work in the factory all day. They'd work for 8 hours, go home, and what did they do all night? Did they do something positive? Did they read? Did they try to educate themselves? Hell no. They watched television and drank beer. And they died in their 50s and 60s. And whenever there was a smoke break, they always took it. Because, okay, well, that's what killed them. Anyway, and these were my friends. These were the people I grew up with. Happens in prisons, of course. And sadly enough, it happens in nursing homes, that people they develop learned helplessness, and they just die. The reality is that when you're old, and when you're in a situation like this, you die when you feel like it. You stay alive as long as you want to, and then you die. Whenever you give up, you die. That's just the way it works. I've watched it over and over and over and over and over again. If somebody doesn't want to live anymore, they just die. My dad, that's how my dad died. My dad had psoriasis, really, really bad, to the extent that he barely had any skin. And he just hung on and he hung on and he hung on. And finally one day he asked my mom if it's okay to die. And my mom says, "Sure, you could have asked me before." And like 5 minutes later he was dead. He just gave up and died.
Have you seen The Notebook?
No.
I was looking at nursing homes.
Okay.
Like, I guess it's like a really good environment.
Yeah.
Where they have like beautiful nurses and handsome nurses, and like the whole environment is just like a vacation. And then they go on vacations and they go on like these, but they say that individuals in that nursing home, they
Right.
live over 100.
Oh, sure.
So I'm like,
Oh, because everybody's so pretty.
Yeah.
So-
Party every day.
Funny.
And I'm gonna invest in that, actually.
Why not? You're not good enough looking to do that, but you know, maybe you can hire somebody that's really pretty. I'm sorry, that was just teasing. You're good looking enough, you can work at one of those. I used to watch people die all the time, and they'll die on their anniversary date, they'll die on their birthday, they'll die on Christmas. Christmas is horrible. Oh my God, I used to work in the morgue on Christmas. It was the worst day in the world. New Year's, oh geez, don't work on New Year's. For Catholics, it was like Easter. Gee, many Christmas. If you die on Easter, you go to heaven or something, I don't know. And it was a Catholic hospital. Gee, many Christmas, what a mess. Just terrible. So you live until you're ready to go. My mother didn't want to die in front of me.
Is there an age limit to that?
No, of course
Maybe
not.
90 or over 100?
Oh, no, it's whenever you feel like it, whenever you're ready. Don't worry, you'll know. My mother didn't want to die in front of me, so I went home to visit my mom. And she's real sick, and she's just kind of laying there, and she's walking around, and then she's laying back down. And I knew she was ready to go because she wasn't answering questions. It's called terminal drop, but it's not important. Anyway, so my mother didn't want to die in front of me. So I said, Mom, I was working in Iowa at the time, and I was in Indiana. And I said, Mom, I have to leave. And she said, okay, because I need to get home so that I can teach tomorrow. And she said, okay, well, okay, I'll see you later, is what she said. And I kissed her goodbye and I took off. And about 20 minutes down the road, I get a call from my sister. She says, Mom just died. She didn't want to die in front of me because she wanted me to go to work. She didn't want me not to go to work. And if she had died in front of me, I would have tried to take care of the body and the whole rest of it. So I was already on the road. And she died when she died so that I wouldn't miss work. How about that? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's
That is
crazy.
kind of crazy, isn't it? My dad did the same thing. My dad died on a Tuesday. He died on a Tuesday because he wanted me to work, and then they were going to bury him on Friday. He didn't die on Monday. He didn't die on Sunday, so I'd miss a week's worth of work. He died on Tuesday so that I could go to the funeral on Saturday. Isn't that stupid? Okay. Anyway, people die when they want to. How about that for a bottom line? Learned helplessness. So we're talking about learned helplessness. People who feel helpless lose motivation to respond. They display impaired learning. They experience stress. They experience anxiety. They experience depression. They are less likely to engage in health-enhancing behaviors. They are more likely to engage in health-compromising behaviors like substance abuse. It can be, of course, it's always life-threatening to have learned helplessness. Because if you ever get in a situation where you can actually escape, you don't. Racism, a study by Scott in 2001 showed that African American adolescents who perceived little control over racism-related stress showed more avoidance and emotion-focused coping. When they perceived high levels of personal control over racial stressors, they were more likely to use problem-focused strategies. Now this is real important. Of course, I'm 70 years old, so I was alive during the Civil Rights Movement. And what we used to see before the Civil Rights Movement we saw writers who were writing about the fact that black people should be proud of themselves. There were a lot of black people in the United States that weren't proud of themselves. They straightened their hair to look more white, as strange as that may seem. So they had to give other black people the idea that they were worth something. And they did that with the Black is Beautiful movement in the United States, as stupid as that is. Now, places where black people aren't treated poorly, they already had a Black is Beautiful movement. They weren't straightening their hair anymore. The only place they were straightening their hair were places where they had to be white in order to be acceptable. Okay. So the less racist an area is, and the more control that people feel over racism, the less likely they're going to have a problem. How about that? Less learned helplessness. So where would be the worst place in the United States to be black?
Virginia.
Virginia's pretty bad. But it's not as bad as North Carolina, which isn't as bad as South Carolina, which isn't as bad as Georgia, which isn't as bad as Alabama, which isn't as bad as Mississippi. Well, it's one of those southern states where you have a large black population, but the population isn't working. It's a low socioeconomic situation. So we're going to have a primary in South Carolina next week, I think, if I'm not mistaken. South Carolina has a large black population. Second, it has the largest black population of any state in the union. But in South Carolina, black people aren't treated very well. There is a lot of racism in South Carolina. So we'll see what happens. But most of the Democrats in South Carolina are black, as interesting as that is. Why am I talking about this? Okay, so as long as you're living in a place where there's not very much racism, then you feel stronger, you feel more empowered. Regulatory controls are the ways in which people modulate their thinking, emotions, and behavior over time and across changing circumstances. People with good regulatory control are calmer, they're able to delay gratification, they control their emotions, they show more problem-focused coping. They're too loose or under-controlled, they're more impulsive, they're unable to delay gratification, they're aggressive and venting. One of the things that we see in poor neighborhoods, in poor environments, is individuals who don't feel a lot of control. And they have a really difficult time controlling their gratification. In other words, if they get money, they spend the money. They spend it almost right away. This used to happen in factory towns. If factory workers used to get paid every Friday, and by Monday they were broke because they spent all their money over the weekend. Hopefully they didn't drink it away, but even if they had a family, all the money was gone before Monday, and then they would wait until Friday to get paid again because they didn't have any money. Now hopefully they filled up with gasoline so they could go to work, but if they didn't, now they got a problem. They have to borrow money. And a lot of times, this is one of the reasons why they have those places where you can borrow money by writing a check against your paycheck. And there's tons of those up around the factory towns. So any place you have a poor population, you have a problem with delayed gratification. You also have a problem with making babies. Poor people want to make as many babies as they possibly can, especially black males. Poor males, not just black males. Yeah. Poor white males do the same thing. I imagine poor natives do exactly the same thing. They don't have any money, babies have something to do with something. We're not exactly sure what. But we see it a lot. We see it in any poor neighborhood. We see a lot of, illegitimate's the wrong word, a lot of babies being born where the guy doesn't marry them. I have a friend that has 5 kids with 4 different women. I had a friend back home who had 3 women pregnant at the same time. His girlfriend, his wife, and his ex-wife. Yeah, and they all gave birth within a week of one another. Oh, man. And he tried to escape by joining the army and going to Vietnam. And they garnished his wages. In other words, he wasn't making any money because all of his money was going to his 3 babies. It was too funny. It was real funny. Well, not that funny.